Okay, hi Clayton. You're somebody I've encountered in various text forms before, but I've never spoken to you before. So I know you have a fair amount of familiarity with the typing sessions and such. Am I correct?
That's right. Yeah, decent amount.
Okay, cool. So let's start then with the SI demonstration test, where I'd like you to give me a sequence of small, insignificant events that happened in the last few hours prior to this.
Okay, sure. So this might be a decent indication of either SI fourth or eighth. I'm not sure which. But an example would be today, and I believe it was yesterday. So I go to a gym that has like a blockade of lockers in it, and each one of them is numbered. And when I go store my stuff in there, come back and finish my workout, I tend to forget where I put my stuff, even though I numbered, and so it's essentially ignoring. To walk through systematically how my day has been so far, I woke up just prior to 9, called a cab at 9:45, left my house at 10, arrived at my work for 10:40. Prior to that was on SkyTrain, it's like a public transport service. Finished at 11:40, was at the gym by just after 12, went and at the door, something in the locker as I mentioned, then go back and find it, and it was probably 10-15 minutes after I started, and take notice again, like I mentioned, of the number that was on the locker. And I made a joke with a girl who's getting her stuff. I'm like, this happens to me perpetually. So then the workout lasted approximately an hour and a half. Hopped on the SkyTrain, came back here. I probably got in about half an hour ago, showered, and then got ready for the call.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Of course, your indication there that it could be fourth or eighth. It could also be fifth.
Right.
Fourth and fifth are hard to tell apart. But
Right.
okay, so let's talk about your poop. Now, this is how it is for me with pooping,
Right.
and I'm going to describe SI mindset of pooping, and then the NI mindset of pooping, and you tell me which one you're more aligned. Okay. So as an SI pooper, I have two kinds of having to poop. I have to poop in general because I haven't pooped in a while, versus I have to poop right now. And sometimes if I have to poop right now, I won't poop right now and it'll go back up inside. So then that just adds to my I have to poop in general thing. But I may not be able to poop right now if I go sit down on the toilet, right?
Yeah.
All right. So this is something that occupies a surprising amount of my attention, actually. Like, I think about it a lot. Like, when's the last time I pooped? When do I have to poop again? Versus, like, Rachel's pooping thing is she has to poop right now.
Right.
Or she doesn't have to poop.
Yeah. Mine is definitely more of closer to the one that you described. More of a lingering effect too. Or almost, maybe lingering is the best word. More of like a creeping effect. If that kind of makes sense.
Okay.
One thing I think you've mentioned before is that you'll hold your pee for too long.
Yeah.
Then that's something that I experience probably daily.
All right. Well, you know what?
But
Try
that's where,
not to. Try not
yeah,
to, because when you get older, then you won't be able to hold it for very long. You have to go every couple of hours.
that's right. A toilet isn't always accessible, so yeah.
Okay, can you talk to me about how you go to sleep at night? So, do you like to have background noise and stuff playing? Do you prefer to have it quiet? What's more important, to have it all the way dark or all the way quiet? Those kind of questions.
Darker the better. If I am not pressed to get up in the morning, I'll usually end up listening some YouTube podcast or something like that as I drift off. But if I have to get up by a certain time, clients the next day or whatnot, then dark, quiet, cool, usually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what goes on in your head as you're putting yourself to sleep? Are you reviewing events of the day? Are you thinking about things you have to do tomorrow? Are you thinking about some imaginary shit? Like I do when I try to make myself go to sleep, I try to put myself in like an imaginary world or something. If am thinking about the day's events or shit to come, then I'm having trouble falling asleep, you know?
Right. Well, yeah, my default state is more so in concept land.
Okay.
So it's not, I don't go through any exercises to try to go to sleep. It's more so it hits me when it hits me.
Okay.
Yeah, which is hopefully soon. But yeah, no, I don't go through any methodical steps or something like that. So yeah.
Okay, cool. If I had to ask broadly as a question, what values do you think you can consistently rely upon yourself to uphold in life? What's your answer?
I would argue novelty and reasoning.
Okay.
One of my chief sources of joy, I would say, is a group chat with some of my best friends back in another city where I used to live. The name of the group chat is the Dilettante Philosophizers. So basically recreational philosophers, and we debate a series of politics, philosophy, things of that nature. Fitness to an extent, but that's pretty dry. There's not much there because we all like to train, but it's more so in the politics and philosophy, metaphysics realm. So
how long have you been into training and stuff?
I would have started at 12 or 13. Always my taught me Arnold, like bodybuilding. So I read that.
Well, your audio is cutting out. Can you repeat that last bit?
Sorry. Yeah, so I was 12 or 13. I was a really fat kid, and my dad bought me Arnold's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding.
Okay.
So I read that. He bought me weights and whatnot. And so I started plugging away at that. And it was pretty inconsistent up until, I would say, it was probably inconsistent for 2 years, I would say, till I was 15, and we moved, and I met a girl, and I decided that I was going to go to the gym every day. As a result, dropped a bunch of weight. It ended up being a redundancy in terms of that end, because she ended up going on living her life, and my interests went elsewhere, as is often the case. And then for me, it became more of just an intellectual outlet interest in terms of studying the mechanisms behind it of physical
Okay.
various design programs. Yeah.
Let's do some TI questions. If only squirrels gather nuts, and I gather nuts, am I necessarily a squirrel?
Yes.
If either mom or dad will come see me play soccer in the game on Saturday, unless I hurt myself in practice on Thursday, and mom's out of town this weekend, and I don't hurt myself on practice, what can we conclude?
Sorry, could you?
I'll repeat it. If I play in the game on Saturday, soccer game, then either mom or dad will come see me play.
Okay.
However, I won't play in the soccer game unless I don't injure myself in practice on Friday.
Oh.
If I don't injure myself in practice on Friday, I will play in the soccer game.
Right.
And mom's out of town this weekend. And good news, I don't injure myself at practice on Friday. What can we conclude?
Oh, well, then your dad will be in attendance.
Okay. Let's try some missing generalizations. Here's an example. You can't come in here. You're not a poet. The missing generalization would be only poets are allowed in here.
Right.
Okay, so she must love math. She's got glasses.
People who wear glasses love math.
Yes, but you have to begin it with all, only, or no.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
There's no way that she enjoys cruise ships. She gets seasick.
No people who.
You know what I think causes you to cut out audio-wise is when I'm pulling a bong rip. At least that's the correlate the last couple of times. So
What would be the transfixiation?
the transubstantiation. Yeah. If you're feeling high right now, that means it's the result of the transubstantiation, I guess.
Right.
Okay, so can you repeat your answer to that question?
It would be the no people who get seasick enjoy cruises.
Right. Well, your TI is obviously good. Do you do any creative stuff like writing, making music, acting, sculpting, anything like that? Taking pictures?
No, I will write my ideas down in notes at times that will occur to me on deliberation. And I suppose you could say that my outlet would be linking back to what I mentioned before, just the argumentation chains that I'll make with my friends while debating. That would be my outlet of manifestation or creation. But no, I don't do any.
Okay, so let me just say right now that here's what I suspect. I suspect you self-identify as an ENTP, and that one of your considerations here is whether or not I'm going to type you as an ESTP.
That was
Right.
Yeah.
So
bang on.
I can tell you right now I am leaning ESTP.
Okay.
But let's see if we can nail this down, because I can understand why you'd think you're an ENTP,
Right.
regardless of anything else. Just because you're very strong TI, you're interested in philosophical stuff and argumentation, and that's sort of like the textbook description of ENTPs you're going to read online and stuff. So,
Right.
all right, let's try some extrovert intuition stuff and see what that produces. I want. Let's play Dungeons and Dragons. Okay.
Yep.
So, your character, you're a fighter. You've got a sword, and you've got a magic cloak that repels offensive spells cast against you. Now, you go into a room in a dungeon, and there's a couple of orcs sitting at a table playing poker. What do you do?
It would depend on their actions toward me. Are they attempting to attack me as a result?
They're startled. You walk in and they're startled. Hello? What? What are you doing here?
Okay. At that point, I would probably... Okay, so this is where I go with the storyline, essentially?
Yeah, we're playing Dungeons and Dragons, yes.
Okay, so I walk in, the orcs are startled, I have my magic cloak, and I approach what seems to be the leader of the group to introduce myself to him and whatnot, but then...
Okay, wait. I'm the dungeon master here, okay? So you approach the leader. There's 3 total orcs. The leader, you can tell he's the leader because he's got feathers in his hat. And he goes, whoa there, buddy. What are you doing?
Right.
What are you doing here? Who never taught you how to knock? Number 2. And where do you think you're going?
Okay, so at that point, I would say, look, I come from the future, and I come to warn of your imminent doom, because unbeknownst to you, there is a dragon coming from the alternate dimension behind me, so 2 away.
Hold on here, says the orc leader. Oh, wait, you're from the future. Why are you wearing contemporaneous clothing and garb?
Like I'm saying, well, prior to arriving here, I wasn't sure that the temperament of your regency would be matched by the plebs surrounding you, and perhaps be shocked by my Converse All-Stars and ripped jeans. I'll explain to you what that is later. And shown me as a...
Okay, except your character's not actually from the future, so they didn't know about those Converse and ripped jeans. But okay, I'll go with it. That's fine.
Well, no, I said that I'd explain to him what those are later.
I know, but your character doesn't know what they are.
Oh, right. Okay.
Okay, so that's interesting. That would seem like front stack expert intuition in general, but let's do some more tests here about this because, all right. So there's a lady, and she's lost her dog somewhere in Manhattan. Okay. Now, she wants you to come up with different ways to find her dog.
Right. Well, poster dog, something that I would do is attempt to canvas in and amongst the homeless people, because typically homeless people are quite lonely and want pets to care for and something nice to hold. Shelters would be another obvious outlet. I'd also check Chinatown, not to be, stereotypical, but it is a preferable food source. Also, too, I would look in Central Park. Are there any birds of prey in New York?
There are hawks and falcons in New York, I'm pretty sure.
Park, but at that point, I wouldn't get my hopes up too much. There are obviously foxes there.
Are there foxes in Central Park?
Oh, well, I'm assuming that there's got to be foxes and raccoons, I would think.
Rachel, are there foxes in Central Park?
I can't confirm.
She doesn't know.
maybe raccoons or perhaps some Brooklynite squirrels, who've been overfed and a little bit too truculent.
It's true that New York squirrels are known to shank stray dogs.
It's true. Well, that's where there's the similar to how the ethnic gangs will sometimes collaborate for a given project. I think that can carry over to the species as well. Although, from what I've heard, no one likes the pigeons because the pigeons tend to be rather flaky and not that original or self-reliant. Thus, the term in hockey, the player is a pigeon when all he does is ride shotgun and can't create anything on his own.
Never heard that term before.
Yeah.
What was that interesting fact I learned yesterday? We learned a couple of them. Do you remember any of them? Yesterday I had several TILs.
Okay, so not yesterday, but the day before, we learned that the Doberman Pinscher are actually the small version.
Right, the small version of the Doberman Pinscher came first, then the big version of the Doberman Pinscher.
Is that when he was a puppy and then grew up?
No. No. But that's a hilarious joke. Wouldn't you have expected that they started with the big Doberman Pinscher and worked down?
Well, it would depend too. It's like what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Except there's an answer to this question. It's the little one.
The little one.
I would have thought the big one came first. I thought it did, but that's why I watch the Westminster Dog Show, so I can learn important facts like that.
Well, there are certain breeds too that are almost it almost looks like a cross between a Chihuahua and a Doberman, but it's not. That might have been some ancient form of breeding, because I don't think they're compatible now. I think if you tried to breed if the male were the little guy, I don't think he'd be able to reach the female.
Well, it depends how accommodating she is, right?
Depends what kind of a lover she is, right?
Right. If she really makes her effort to make herself available, I'm sure he could find a way in there.
if she's a Newark girl, then she'll make do. But if it's the other way around, I think, I'm sure it's happened where you've had some type of rupturing of that, but I don't think that's exclusive to, two dogs who look at each other, Doberman, who assume that they ought to be present as a form of, what would you call it, racial purity, right?
Well,
I think that's just happened over time. I'm sorry.
No, people breed these dog breeds on purpose that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the reason the Doberman Pinscher is called the Doberman Pinscher is because it was bred by a guy named Mr. Doberman.
Mr. Doberman? Yeah, that makes sense.
Mr. Doberman made that breed. It's another thing I learned the other day.
Was he
from the
a thief?
He was a tax collector, and he wanted dogs that would intimidate people. And so, but he started with the small ones and worked up.
Interesting. So Doberman, was he actually a tax collector?
Yeah, in Germany. He was a tax collector in Germany.
Because I made the joke relative to the thief because Doberman Pinscher.
Uh-huh. Well,
so
yeah.
But
the thing is, the Pinscher dog is etymologically unrelated to that kind of pinching.
Oh, that's the little one. I see. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so it's a breed that stems from. There's a few, I guess, main breeds. It's okay. Let me ask you some typing questions. All right. So, what's I'm sure you've heard me ask before. I would like to hear your take on it. What's been your thinking about the question, which would you rather drown first, a kitten or a puppy?
I haven't heard that one. I would argue that would be relative to the context, which is kind of a non-answer. Well, not necessarily a non-answer, but it would be, excuse me, let's say I have a puppy and a kitten, and I have the option to raise one which will help me survive in a post-apocalyptic world. I would likely, and the other one's just going to be draining my resources, I drown the kitten rather. However, if it were a matter of, okay, I need to feed my family with one, and one will, let's say my child is more attached to the kitten, then it would make obvious sense to drown the puppy.
What if you were planning to milk one of them?
To milk one of them?
And they both were females. Which would you rather drink, dog milk or cat milk?
At that point in time, it just comes down to who's got nicer tits. So. It would be, I would think, in an odd way, I tend to associate, I don't know if it's actually that odd, but femininity with a feline. So if I were to suck on any pair of animal titties, I would...
You don't have to drink it directly from the teat.
But where's the...
You have to milk it first. Very, very small milking.
It would... There would still be that female connection to go with the kitten.
Okay. All right. Cool. Those are very good FI-polar reasons. Okay. So yeah, of course, typically, some people, regardless of where their FI is, will say, "Well, obviously, I'd prefer to drown neither." But
That's
but FI polar people what's her name? What's that ESTP girl's name?
That you typed?
Yeah, not recently, but the younger one who's like Lila's age, who kept bugging me about shit. Mackenzie.
Oh, Mackenzie.
She answered the puppy because it would struggle less. That's another good FI polar answer,
Yeah, very pragmatic.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do a little TE testing. Can you break down, let's say I came to you and said, I really want to I really want to enter into male synchronized swimming, which is going to be a new event in the Olympics coming up, and I want to win a gold medal in it. Can you take on the role of sort of life coach, walk me through the big steps I'll need to go through in order to accomplish this goal?
Well, as a trainer, it would be focusing predominantly on getting you with body weight movements, closed chain movements, because that's going to replicate more so what you're doing in the pool. At that point, we'd start working on your technique, various strokes relative to your anthropometry, limb length relative to torso. Do a lot of technique work. I would likely train you 5 days a week in the pool.
What if I warn you that I don't really like getting wet?
Oh, you know? Oh, well, at that point, I just invent a skin thin like wetsuit that you could wear that would mesh to your tone almost in low key fashion, so that no one wearing a suit, but you wouldn't actually feel any of the water, and it would be breathable. It would convert the oxygen in the water so that it would actually be breathable.
You're a really dedicated coach.
Yeah. I'm a consummate professional.
Okay, I mean, your extrovert intuition is very robust. There's little disputing that you're an ENTP. I mean, and the thing that's great about it is, obviously, you don't look like a picture of an ENTP, right?
I know.
So it's nice because, first of all, we ENTPs have the capacity to get all buff and cut too. Okay, so don't count us out. If we want to apply ourselves to that, we can do that too.
Yeah.
But second of all, it means if you let me publish this video, this is going to be very controversial no matter what, because there are people out there who just don't use TI-NI as, ideally, I think you got TI as an instrumental value, you've got NI as an absolute value. That way you're using logic to get to the truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you have the truth, NI, as an instrumental value, you're going to have a weird relationship with typology and cognitive functions, because you're never going to really be satisfied by knowing your type. After all, that singular truth is just supposed to be instrumental to something else. So it's not, right. It's like, in the best case scenario, it's like, well, I know my type so that I can understand why I'm the way I am, I guess. That would be okay, but I think in general...
Would that be what?
Well, I think ESFPs think they want their type to change according to what they want to be right now.
Right.
And so that's a straight up like 4-slot instrumental NI.
Yeah. Yeah.
ESTPs seem to have a much better relationship with their 4th-slot NI when it comes to typology, anyway. But they still posit all sorts of crazy conspiracy theories and stuff periodically.
Yeah.
We have half an hour left because it's pretty. I don't even know how to begin disputing that you're an ENTP. Anybody watching us converse and have this conversation, can see that you're just as quick with it as I am, and just as overflowing with it,
Would you believe me if I told you that I projected how this conversation would go insofar as ESTP appearance, questionable SI, TI's good, SI, leaning ESTP, but then the NE would flow through? I honestly, and you know what? It's interesting that you mentioned that in terms of publishing it, and I'm assuming during the premiere, people are going to look at me and they're going to go, this guy, is ESTP, ENTJ, maybe ESTJ, something like that.
I wasn't fooled by those possibilities at all. Okay, I wasn't fooled by ENTJ or ESTJ at all. I didn't think those at all. Okay, but this is what I thought going in. He's an ESTP who thinks he's an ENTP, and when we get to the NE test, it's going to reveal that in fact he is not an ENTP. He's definitely an ESTP. That's what I thought it was going to go down, but it definitely didn't go down like that.
Yeah. That's right. No, that's essentially what I thought you would think, partially based on appearance, partially, which is, I mean, everyone falls into that trap, right? I am kind of an anomaly in terms of an appearance of an ENTP, but also because of the aforementioned shitty SI.
Actually, the thing that made me think you were an ESTP at first was the concision of your answers. Starting out, you're in pure TI mode and tool function mode, as ENTPs tend to be, and and so your answers were more concise, more precise as well, and so I thought, okay, this sounds like good, strong 8-slot NE with good tool function TI, probably ESTP.
Yeah. Access when you need it, essentially, but not rely on it for just like an autopilot mode.
Right. But then when I got you involved in some NE stuff, the big difference between 8-slot and first slot is no matter how well the 8-slot riffs off of me and riffs with me, they are definitely riffing off of me and riffing with me.
Yeah.
As soon as I hand over for a second, you take the lead.
Right.
And that's just that just doesn't happen. I mean, I've got pretty robust NE myself, and it doesn't happen unless you're another NE dom.
It's special, honestly, in a very FE type of way. It's cool to encounter that. One of my best friends in the group chat is quite well, because it's a very similar interaction style. Excuse me. And we fight like dogs. Not personal, but debate.
I'm sure, because you're both trying to establish that you're the dominant NETI person.
Exactly. And there's another friend in the group chat. He's tested as ENTJ, but in listening to how he parses and how he reasons, and just in knowing his tendencies associated with the functions, it would not surprise me if he were an ENTP as well. So yeah, he's tested ENTJ, but I don't think that. My other best friend in the group chat is definitely strong ENTJ. Like very, and it's a pronounced difference. Watching you break down your system, I've noticed strong delineations between the friend who tested ENTJ and the one who tested ENTJ but actually is.
Right.
There's significant how you operate, how you funnel information into your brain and then output it. It's very distinct.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it's distinct in ways that aren't necessarily just about skills. Like, it's a frame of reference that you can see when people are insistent that the frame be not questioned so that they can do their analysis in it, you know?
Right.
Versus people who are operant in a sense that both the frame and the tools have to be questioned and contextually appropriate. It's like you can't just go in assuming this frame of reference, and that's where ENTPs typically get into conflict with like ENFPs is they because of their tool function being FI, they have this way of just saying the answer is the thing I'm attached to is the important thing, and it doesn't matter how I get there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like you could prove them wrong 100 times. They'll say, "Yeah, but I'm just not expressing it the right way yet because I'm already settled on my answer."
It's yeah. I was gonna say that is in regards to a very subjective preference. I don't have as much issue with that, although it could be reasoned out that it's an unwise pursuit or based on a faulty means of evaluation. But when it is pertaining to an answer relating to something that requires a thorough analysis, if you presuppose the answer based on what you hope happens, at that point it just becomes intellectually dishonest. And it's not something that they intend, I don't think.
I agree with you.
I think that it is more so a, words are arbitrary. They can change. This actually ties into something I was going to mention. I think that some of the most prominent proponents of something like critical race theory are ENFPs.
Oh yeah, for
and
sure.
I believe that the foot soldiers, the bootlickers, if you will, who carry it out ad nauseum without much in the way of questioning, more so execute it, are ESFPs. That's what I would see. I think that there's probably a middle tier of ESFJ where they will side initially with the critical race theorists, but if you reason with them, and this is also too based on my own anecdote, if you reason with them, they tend to see, because they're TI in their front stack, they'll see the merit argument, but there's almost a hesitancy to acknowledge the correctness of your position. There's also to the adjacent point that is, I can't acknowledge from their point of view your correctness of your analysis due to the fact that your head will get too big. I can't let you get too puffed up, right? I need to keep you down with the plebs, right?
Don't start thinking you're better than other people and always right all the time.
And it's like, no, I am fully cognizant of my weaknesses. We're going to list that with a given individual. It seems as though if you start going down that line of argumentation, that again just ends up being ignored, because then it ends up proving your point, because you prove that you're not based what you're saying on thinking that you're universally better than other people.
Are you describing ESFJ ground shifting game? I lived with that for years.
It's almost as though it's okay. It's almost as though there's several categories taking place. It's moving from one frame to another, and not acknowledging that they're different frames, or saying, actually, this frame is what I meant the whole time. And then when you point out the contradiction, well,
I'll just shift ground again. Okay, so 7.29 then. What? Where did that come from? That's totally not relevant. Okay, then A. All right, that's enough for me. But B then, B. But you're missing the point. We're trying to get to. I said 7.29 then. All right, this conversation is driving me insane.
It's how you view categories. I think that's fundamentally what it might come down to.
Explain that a bit. What do you mean by how you view categories?
So, what I mean in that context is when two variables can coexist, the conditions underlying that, when they are necessarily mutually exclusive, and when they under no uncertain terms can ever coexist simultaneously. So, for instance, nothing can ever be both A and not A.
The law of non-contradiction.
The law of Aristotelian logic, essentially, and something that I think a major issue of conflict as well is when I try to explain the process through which I think there's very little patience, so it ends up being she will say, I get from point A to point Z, right? You have to touch all the letters in between to get there. And it drives her brain crazy that I have to do that, essentially, based on what she said. For me, it's, well, I don't know where I'm going until I get there.
Right.
So so you might say this is, okay, so here would be an example. A 20-something-year-old female dating a 50-something-year-old male is, by definition, creepy. Have we worked out the variables leading to that not distinction, but classification. Why we and common sense isn't.
Well, it's an FE question. I mean, the thing is, on an FE level, she's right that would be the case. On an individual level, which is where deliberation functions like to operate, it would depend. But I would say that the FE, her correctness on the FE level is why when I broke up with my last girlfriend, who was the same age as me, and I was looking for a new one, I said, I'm not going to date anybody under 30. And I ended up with Rachel, who's 36. So part of the reason why is because of that FE truth. I knew that if I dated somebody who was in their 20s, that I would be subject to a certain kind of FE attack that I wanted to avoid. And when I started dating Rachel, she was 34 and I was 48, I think. I said, okay, that's perfect. You know, it's like nobody can. Now she's 36. So just the other day, in fact, somebody texted me and asked me how old she was, obviously looking for ammunition against me. But I said she's 36, and they said, oh.
That sounds could be wrong, but that almost sounds INTJ.
What do you mean? Am I thinking about it like that?
No. Well, not as if there's some form of singularity in regards to this is binarily wrong under any and all conditions universally. Things like that. Is that possible?
Well, I mean, it sounds like more like the FE equivalent. So, you know, the INTJ would think that sort of thing, but not about that sort of issue particularly.
Right.
It's the FE equivalent of it, which is I don't need to know more details than my heuristic, which says if you're 50 and she's under 30, it's too big of an age gap.
Right. It's essentially, that's true. It's more of I don't even know if you would, more so a human interaction value set perhaps, whereas I'm assuming INTJ would be operating more so logistically, like this is the lone correct political system or something like that through which to govern. And
or the lone correct explanation for why things are the way they are.
Right. Yeah.
And of course, in both instances, they're totally have their heads up their asses.
Right.
But as ENTPs, we're both accustomed to meeting lots of people in life who we think have their heads up their asses.
It ends up curtailing a lot of what would otherwise be, you know, productive and meaningful conversation, really. Because I think at a certain point, what I've come to terms with, and it's not a bad thing. It doesn't affect me negatively emotionally, but I've come to the realization that certain people, when I was younger, I was definitely under the assumption or motive incentive to attempt to make friends with everyone. And eventually you learn that the relationships that crash and burn are operating under a mechanistic operating system. It's not by chance. It's not via a random event. And I think learning typology really helped in that capacity. People are different in many a way. Using this system, there are 16 different ways that they are dividable, and there will be inherent conflict when certain interactions do take place between certain types. That's not to say that the relationship is a wash, but it does give you some perspective, to be sure.
Yeah, it definitely had a huge impact on how I understand my own relationships in terms of the stories I tell about them, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I kind of had a falling out of sorts or ceased being friends with an ESTJ, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. Not really formally any big deal. I just stopped contacting him, you know? And, oh, you're having audio issues.
Sorry, repeat
So I kind of had a falling out of sorts with an ESTJ about 10 years ago. It wasn't really anything dramatic. It was just I stopped being interested in hanging out with him, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And now I understand why that, like, what that was about. It's basically ESTJ is my benefactor type, and I'm the beneficiary type, socionics relation, you know. And the thing is, it really does play out like that. The relationship is most successful when the parties have that kind of attitude towards each other.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that sort of changed between me and this guy was it was more like I was better at the things he was doing than he was, and it's not supposed to be like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I've had I recently started my own business, which was a wise decision. I would say I get a lot more fulfillment, meaning, and care out of what I'm doing. But my boss was ESTJ, and it was I think he recognized my strengths or gifts, if you want to call them that, but it was recognition without value, if that makes sense.
well, yeah, it does.
Which would inevitably lead to conflict, and there were areas of conflict where there would be claims made. Almost, it was weird because I'm pretty sure he's ESTJ, but the claims were almost funneled through an NI lens because there weren't many concrete examples, even though I'd ask for them. And part of me thinks that they were avoided because and some were given, but they were minimal at best, I would say. Part of that reason, I think, is because he was smart enough to know that if they were concretized to me, I'd be able to negate them. And anytime they were concretized, I would own up to where, yeah, okay, that's a valid point, but the proportionality to which you are lending to it a value judgment is grotesque. And or I just
I like that use of grotesque.
or I just flat out negate it as being correct. But for the most part, it was a general framing of, well, low resolution. Someone's, anonymous says you tend to do this, that, or the other. I'm like, okay, well, seeing as we're operating in the frame of low resolutionality, I'm going to give you a list of things that I have seen that do not bother me. I do not think affect the company in any meaningfully negative way. However, if you are going to hold me to a given standard, you ought to hold these other areas of your company as equally as accountable. And so I ripped through them, to which, there wasn't much of a response, as I suspected. So I don't think I can expect much logical consistency from someone with that value set and frame of reference.
But you weren't challenging their logic. You were challenging their NI. You were saying you have weighted things irrationally, which is different than being just straight up like TI. The thing is, they avoid TI disputes like the plague. They avoid them like death itself. But what you're really saying is you've overweighted a given factor. In other words, you're wrong about its relevance. And really, that's what introverted intuition is all about. So you're hitting him right in his polar. He's got nothing to say about it. He knows he's wrong about his relevance, but he doesn't get that matters. In fact, he kind of hates that it does.
Yeah. It's and it's kind of, it's almost as though the claims that were made were presented as though they would be SI, but then it's almost like you're trying to like, if you can imagine, what would it be like regular tires on a semi truck. In a way. Okay, we're gonna drive from Alaska to New Jersey, right? And we're gonna drive there in a semi, assuming that fit the make and model of the vehicle and the structure of it, but then you end up putting Volkswagen bug tires on it, and it's sloppy and incoherent, and half the time you're like, what? It's not even, I'm not sure if that's...
I would say this is a very good example of the analogical thinking that typifies ENTPs. The brief pause there was I was muting so that Rachel's cough wouldn't come through. For those of you at home, you got to enjoy Rachel's cough.
Your dad is ESTJ, right?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. Mine is either ESTJ or ISTJ. I'd actually like you to type him. I think that would be interesting. But he's definitely an STJ. I would say ISTJ. That's probably likely.
Okay.
Answer.
Well, I just want to say here as we draw this to a close, because I've got to try to squeeze in an errand between. I got an hour before the next typing session, but that this is a perfect example of why you need to use skills tests, values, and stuff like that to type somebody, and not just description correlates.
Voltology.
or certainly not Voltology either, but just description correlates. So if you were to describe Clayton in sort of like a bio sense, you'd say, well, he's a fitness coach and he works out and he's buff and he's got his own business and does all this follow through and he's very logical. He must be an ESTP. But if you actually test him on cognitive functions and do a process analysis rather than just sort of a snapshot description analysis, then it's very obvious this guy is an ENTP.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's definitely, it brings a lot of clarity. Confirms the suspicion. There's studying how cognitive functions actually work. So, and I've learned, I would argue, the most from your system. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching, everybody. And thank you, Clayton. And are you cool with me publishing this?
Could you send me a copy first, and then I just go over it to see all that was said, and then make a determination a little later on?
Okay. Do you want me to edit out a certain part?
Perhaps.
I can do that if need be. Okay. I can do that. All right.
Yeah.
I'll send it to you first privately. All right. Thanks. Bye.